When Peter got home from work, a bit later than normal, he found Sarah in the office apparently continuing to sort through things. "Are you finding anything interesting or valuable in there?" he said, peering into the office. "Hi Peter, yes, I just found a stack of old newspaper clippings from around the 1930s. It looks like they are from the local newspaper," she replied, looking up towards him from the floor where she was sitting. "From the 30s, what are they about?" Peter asked. "Well, let's see, some are photos of social club functions and other group-type photos," she replied. "Perhaps they were saved because of someone in the photos or the articles," he suggested. "Yeah, I haven't got to the point of trying to figure out why they were saved yet, but I plan to," she replied. "Do you know what you want for dinner?" Peter asked. Still sitting down, she said, "Oh, I need to just fix something quick. I'm meeting some of the girls from work tonight at 8:30. "That's nice that they are including you in things already. "Where are you going?" he asked. "We are meeting at that bar on Main Street near the edge of town. I forgot the name already, but I remember where it is," she replied. "Did you want me to come with you?" he asked. She paused a moment, and looked down. She lifted her head back up and replied, "Sorry, but this is really supposed to be a girls' night out." "Oh, that's okay, I wanted to ask at least," he said. "By the way, who was that woman you were driving with this afternoon?" she asked, looking him straight in the eyes. "Oh, that was Colleen, the appraiser for the houses Carl recommended to me," he replied. "Is she married?" she asked. Sensing where this was going, Peter said, "No, I do not think she is married, but this is just business." "Well, just be careful around her," she replied. "Hey, you are the one going to a bar tonight," Peter reminded her, but quickly realized he may have overstepped her limit. "Peter, it will just be us girls having fun. You can trust me, can't you?" she replied with her voice slightly raised. "Yes, I do trust you, Sarah. I want you to trust me as well," he said as he stepped into the room with his arms out. She stood up, and they embraced. They held each other for about a minute. "Okay, let's get some dinner so you'll have time to get ready," Peter suggested. "Sounds good to me, thanks Peter," she replied as she slowly stepped away from him. They walked out of the office and into the kitchen to make a quick dinner. Peter went to bed before Sarah arrived home. He was awakened from a deep sleep by a loud metallic clanging sound, which may have emanated from the basement. He sat up quickly in bed. After rubbing his eyes then, stretching his arms slightly, he looked over and noticed that Sarah was not in bed yet. After taking a deep breath, he decided to see if he could determine what caused the noise. He lowered his feet to the floor, then stood up in his bare feet. Walking slowly in the dark around the bed, he made his way to the door to the hallway. He then remembered he could have turned on the bedside lamp. Instead, he chose to just turn on the room light. Next to the doorway, he reached over to turn on the light switch. 2 wall sconces lit up on the wall near the bedroom door. He pulled the door open slowly, which caused it to squeak relatively loud as it opened. Peter found the switch for the hallway light near the door, and he turned it on as well. The hanging lamp over the stairway illuminated and cast a yellowish glow over the corridor. He walked around the railing separating the stairwell from the hallway. The floorboards creaked with each step as he made his way to the stairs. When he arrived at the stairway, each time he stepped down, the treads let out a low moan. At the bottom of the stairs he walked to the side of the front door to turn on the foyer lights. He then walked past the steps in the hall toward the kitchen. After opening the door to the kitchen, he turned on the kitchen light, and closely examined the room. Since the kitchen could have been an option for the source of the sound, nothing seemed to be out of place in the kitchen that he could see so far. He stepped into the kitchen, while continuing to look around. From what he can remember, things appeared the same as he left them before he originally went upstairs. He realized his first thought may have been correct, that the clanging sound most likely came from the basement. After walking through the kitchen, he twisted the back door knob to the right and left to verify that it was still locked. He headed toward the basement door and slowly pulled it open. It creaked loudly as it swung into the short hallway. Reaching toward the wall just inside of the doorway, he turned on the light switch and peered down the steep, narrow stairs. He slowly started down the staircase. The air from the basement cooled his exposed skin, which helped to make him more aware of what he was doing. The steps creaked under the weight of each step he made. About halfway down the steps he noticed something about 2 feet long, metallic, and round in the middle of the basement floor. The few bare light bulbs in the basement made it difficult for him to initially figure out what it was. As he neared the bottom of the steps, it became apparent that the object was about a foot-long piece of iron pipe. He walked to the pipe and picked it up with his hand. As he was moving it around in his hand to look at it from different angles, he remembered seeing it before. It had been resting on the workbench beyond the furnace on his left. He walked to the workbench and set the pipe back on top. Staring at it for a moment, he guessed that it could have just fallen off of the workbench and rolled to the center of the room, but he was uncertain how valid his explanation of what happened was. He slowly spun around and began to walk toward the stairs again. When he reached the stairway railing, he gazed back toward the workbench area one more time. He then focused back toward the stairs and slowly began walking up the steep steps. About halfway up the stairs, there was a metallic ping sound from somewhere in the basement. He swung around and slowly looked around from left to right. The furnace blocked his view of the workbench, but there was nothing in the middle of the floor like before. He closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. After opening his eyes again, he continued up the rest of the stairs. As he made his way up the steps, he could hear something creaking above him from the first floor. He could hear the screen door swinging open. A noise came from the lock in the back door, and he could make out a figure through the window in the door. As the door opened into the room, he could quickly tell it was Sarah. Her hair was disheveled, and she seemed a bit unstable as she walked into the short back hallway. After looking toward the kitchen, she looked toward the basement and noticed him coming up the steps. Peter could tell she was puzzled. "Honey, what were you doing down there?" "I thought you'd be in bed by now," she asked. As he reached the top of the stairs he answers, "I was in bed, but I checked out a noise I heard from the basement." "You look like you had a good time tonight." Yeah, we did. We were dancing and just having fun. Wasn't quite like the clubs in Farmington, but fun," she said as she swayed slightly. "Let's get you to bed. You'll need to get up for work in a few hours," he reminded her. "Yes, sir," she replied with a mock salute. He shook his head and began to lead her into the kitchen, saying, "Hopefully, you'll be able to sleep tonight." "Oh, I'm tired now, so it won't be a problem. None of them freaky noises will bother me tonight," she said as he guided her to the hallway to the foyer. I hope not, honey," he added. They then went upstairs and he helped her into bed. When Peter arrived home from work on Thursday evening, Sarah was again going through items in the office. As he paused in the back hall, near the rear door, she got up from the chair in the office and came out to greet him. "Hi Sarah, are you still sorting through that stuff in the office?" he asked. "Yeah, I thought I would work on it some more before you got home," she replied, embracing him in the hall. "Have you found anything interesting yet?" he asked, holding her and gazing into her eyes. "Well, I have been looking at some of those articles some more, and I have found at least one person in common in many of the articles," she replied. Maybe that is the person that they were saved for," he commented. "The name I found is an Erika Wahl. I want to keep looking into this more after dinner." "I'm finding this strangely interesting," she said. "Yeah, well, after I get something to eat, I think I'll see what's on the TV." There's plenty of old stuff to go through. Maybe I can help with the basement sometime, he offers. Sure, you look like you need to eat and relax anyway, Sarah commented. Yeah, I suppose. I did manage to keep myself busy today. Though after last night, I thought you'd be the tired one, he commented. Sarah laughed and replied, oh, it'll likely hit me tomorrow. In the past, it usually was the next day before a late night will catch up with me. For me, it's the day after. Booze can hit me hard sometimes, he reminded her. Oh, I remember that happening a few times, she said with a smile. Yeah, let's get something to eat, he responded, nodding his head. Sure, I'll see what we have available, she agreed as she slowly lowered her hands from his back and started toward the kitchen. After dinner, Peter was watching a TV program and Sarah was busy in the office. He heard a loud bang, followed by Sarah screaming. He quickly got up from the chair and ran to the door to the family room. After opening it quickly, he ran into the family room. As he moved quickly through the room, he yelled, Sarah, are you okay? As he reached the door to the office, he could hear her reply, I'm okay, but the damn drawer just slammed shut without me touching it. He opened the door to the office. Sarah was sitting in the wheeled desk chair, which she must have pushed away from the desk, pointing at the large lower right desk drawer. That's the drawer. The bottom one on the right, she said, with her voice trembling. You are okay, though? Peter asked, reaching her side. I'm just really shaken, honey, she replied, still shaking as he knelt to embrace her. What happened? He said, rubbing his hand on her back to try to calm her down. Well, I was sitting at the desk reading some of those old articles and, she paused to take a deep breath. She continued, and I had left that drawer open, since that's where I found the articles. Then the damn thing just slammed shut. Wham! And you didn't bump it or anything like that? He asked, continuing to caress her back. No, I didn't. It just slammed shut by itself, she replied, still shaking a bit. Let me check the drawer, Peter offered. Okay, just be careful, she said as he shifted away from her and got closer to the desk. He reached down to the old oak drawer handle, and he slowly pulled on it. He found the drawer took a bit of force to open. Wow, this is harder to open than I was thinking. It's pretty heavy with all of the files and papers in it, he commented. So what does that mean about the drawer? She asked. I guess it means that it would take some force to shut it, especially with all of the files and paper in it, he replied. I don't know what did that. I've had enough for tonight. I think I probably should just go to bed, she said. Sure, there really isn't much on the TV tonight, so I'll just head up too. We probably should get good night's sleep, since we have the party at Carl's tomorrow, Peter suggested. Thanks, Peter. Let's get out of here, she said as she stood up from the chair. They walked back through the family room and the living room so Peter could turn off the TV before they walked up the steps to their bedroom. Oh, are you still going to be able to meet me for lunch tomorrow? Peter asked as they began to walk up the stairs. Yes, I can take my lunch at 1:30 tomorrow. Just stop by the store and we can walk to the restaurant, Sarah replied, walking in front of him up the steps. Okay, I'll pick you up then, sweetie, he replied. They reached the top of the steps and walked around the stairway balcony to their bedroom. Later that night, Peter was jostled awake by Sarah tapping on his shoulder. The past several nights of interrupted sleep were catching up with him. He struggled to wake, but was able to respond after a few seconds with, what's wrong, sweetie? I know this is getting old, but I still hear voices coming from downstairs somewhere, she replied. More voices, he responded slowly. Sarah detected that he was very tired, so she offered, I can go check downstairs, since I know you are tired. A few seconds passed before Peter replied slowly, are you sure you need to check? It is probably nothing anyway. I just want to do this for myself, she replied as she sat up in bed. I'd do it myself, but I'm just too beat right now. Just be careful and turn the lights on when you go down, he said, with his eyes only partially open. Oh, I'll definitely be using the lights. I'll be back in a few minutes, she said while beginning to stand up from the bed. Okay, he said as he put his head back on the pillow and closed his eyes. He could hear the creaking floor as Sarah made her way to the bedroom door. The knob turned and the door creaked open. A slight glow was cast over his eyes as the hallway light turned on. Her footsteps still could be heard as she made her way to the stairway. He could feel himself drifting quickly back to sleep. By the creaking, he could sense some additional sound for only a moment. It did not alarm him enough to keep him from falling into a deep sleep. Peter felt the bed moving slightly and the covers shifting. It was Sarah returning to bed. Peter managed to mumble, "Find anything down there?" "Nothing, it was very quiet when I went downstairs." "Hopefully that'll be it for tonight," she replied as she pulled the covers over herself. "I hope so too, sweetie," he agreed with another mumble. "Just go back to sleep, honey." "I didn't mean to wake you," Sarah said. "Thanks dear," he said as he fell back to sleep. As Peter and Sarah finished their lunches at the Chiltern River Inn, Peter noticed that Sarah seemed to be a bit distant for some reason, but he was not sure if he wanted to mention it. "So are you still meeting with that appraiser woman?" Sarah asked just before she wiped her mouth with the napkin. Peter finished swallowing and replied, "Yeah, I met her again this morning at the third house I needed appraised." "You still seem bothered by her." "I am keeping this professional, you know. I don't know what it is about her. I know I trust you, but something is making me uneasy," Sarah replied as she turned away for just a moment then looked back into his eyes. "Well, one thing I plan on doing is to let her handle the appraisals by herself in the future. I just wanted to go along with her on these first few to get the feel for the type of houses around here," Peter offered. Sarah breathed a sigh of relief and said, "I think that would help me deal with her. I know she will be at the party tonight, but I'll be there too, so I won't worry about it." "Thanks, honey." Peter looked at his watch and stated, "Well, I suppose we should pay the bill and get back to work soon." "Sure, I'm ready to go." "This was a very nice idea," she said. "Yeah, we'll have to do this again soon," he said as the waitress approached the table. "Are you finished, sir?" the waitress asked. "Yes, and we are ready for the bill too, when you have a chance," Peter replied. "No problem," the waitress replied while looking for the bill in her apron pocket. She set it upside down on the table and said, "I'll take this up when you are ready, sir." "Thank you," Peter replied as he reached for the bill and removed his wallet from his pocket. As Peter and Sarah left the restaurant and started making their way back to work, they stopped on the bridge over the Chiltern River for a moment. Peter still saw that something was bothering Sarah as she stared at the water slowly passing underneath them. He felt he had to ask about it now. "Is something other than the appraiser bothering you, honey?" he asked, watching her while she continued staring at the river. Still transfixed on the river, she sighed and answered, "Well, there are a lot of nice things in this town so far, but I'm really starting to wonder if this is the right place for me." "Why would you think that?" Peter asked, surprised about her thoughts. "It may just be that it will take longer than this to get used to it, but I'm not sure I fit in here," Sarah replied. Peter sighed, watched the river for a moment. He then faced her again and said, "I suppose all I can ask you to do is continue to give it a chance. I know it's a lot different than Farmington, but should be possible to learn to like it. Just give it a chance." After another sigh, Sarah agreed, "I'm not ready to give up or anything, I just have my doubts and I'm letting you know about them." "Well, please feel free to talk about doubts. I want you to enjoy this town as much as I do," Peter replied. "Thanks, Peter," Sarah said, finally looking up from the river and moving closer to embrace him. "Sure, honey," Peter replied as they embraced. They held each other for several seconds. I suppose we should get back to work, Sarah said, pulling back slightly. Okay, let's head back, Peter said as they both turned to head back to town. He kept his arm around her waist as they finished walking across the bridge back toward Main Street. When Peter got home from work, it was about 6:30. As he walked into the house from the back door, he heard some rustling coming from the office, and figured that it was Sarah again sorting through things. Hey, I'm home. Sorry I'm a bit late, though, Peter said, closing the back door behind him. Hi sweetie, is it late already? I guess I wasn't paying attention to the time, Sarah replied as she stood up from the desk chair. Yeah, it's about 6:30, so we'll need to have a quick dinner and get ready, he replied. Okay, let's get some dinner ready and then change. We should be fine as long as we keep moving, she agreed as she made her way to the hallway by his side. Yeah, Carl's place isn't too far away. We'll have to drive, but it should just take a few minutes to get there, he said as they started toward the kitchen. What are you hungry for? She asked. I think we still have some of the chicken left over from last night that we can reheat, he replied. That's easy enough, I'll find it, she responded, heading toward the refrigerator. Did you find anything more interesting in the office this evening? He asked as he reached for some plates in a cupboard. Actually, I really think I'm starting to figure out some of the history of this house. I want to show you what I found, she replied while removing 2 containers of leftover chicken from the refrigerator. You were able to figure out who the people were and that kind of thing? He asked as he set the plates on the counter. Yeah, they sound like they were pretty interesting people. I'll have to show you tomorrow or maybe later, since we are in a bit of rush tonight, she replied as she opened the first container of leftover chicken. I'll make time to see what you found tomorrow. That does sound interesting, he replied. Yeah, it's not quite what I expected, but I'll tell you more about it later. Can you find some glasses and get us something to drink? I'll get the chicken going in the microwave, she asked. Okay, I'll get the glasses. What do you want to drink? He asked while opening the cupboard with the glasses. Oh, I think I'll just have some water. That should be enough for now, she said as she placed the first chicken on the plate. Easy enough, I'll get you some water, he said, taking a glass to the refrigerator and filling it from a pitcher of water. As Peter drove his car down the street of Carl's house, Sarah commented, I think the house should be one of these on the right with several cars parked out front. Yeah, that would be my guess too. Let's see, that house is 426, so that's it. I'll just park down here a ways where there is still room to park, he said while continuing a few houses down past Carl's house to park. Okay, that's good enough. Let me open your door, he offered as he released his seatbelt and opened the car door. He walked around the car to her door and opened it. He extended his hand toward her to help guide her from the car. Thank you, sweetie, she said, reaching for his hand and stepping out of the car. They began walking on the sidewalk toward the house. Peter glanced at the sky and commented, it almost looks like it could rain tonight. I hope not. I didn't bring a jacket, she replied. Actually, there may be one of mine in the car that I can get if you need to later, he said as they began up the driveway. That may help, but hopefully it will hold off until after the party, Sarah replied. Yeah, I hope so too, he agreed as they reached the steps to the porch. They walked together to the front door. Peter found the doorbell and pressed it. They could hear muffled conversation coming from inside. Next, they heard footsteps approaching the door, then they could see a shadow of a person at the door. The knob twisted, and it was pulled open to reveal Carl holding the door. Welcome, Peter and Sarah. Please come in, Carl said while pushing the screen door open for them to enter. Thank you, Carl, you have a very nice house, Peter said, peering inside of the house. Yes, and thanks so much again for having us over. We really do appreciate it, Sarah commented as she led Peter into the house. Well, it's my pleasure to have you two over. Come on in and meet the others, Carl said, gesturing his hand down the hallway toward a room full of people. A woman walked up to them, extended her hand, and smiled. You must be Peter and Sarah. I'm Mary Bishop, she said, continuing to walk toward them. Hello, Mary. I'm Peter Corbin, and this is my wife Sarah, Peter replied as he extended his hand to greet Mary. Hello, nice to meet you, Mary. We really like your house, Sarah replied as she also extended her hand toward Mary's. Well, I do try to keep it clean in spite of having Carl around, Mary said with a big smile. Hey, I'm not that messy, you know, and I do try to help clean sometimes, Carl commented. Yeah, the key word is sometimes, Mary added. Well, let's go in and meet the others now, Carl said to change the subject. Okay, we'll follow you, Peter said as they began to walk toward the room full of people. They reached the room and see several people standing around with either a drink in hand or a small plate of food. Some of them turned to acknowledge the new arrivals. Carl first leads Peter and Sarah to a couple near the table with the spread of food. Peter, Sarah, I know you have met Phyllis before, and this is her husband Errol, Carl said as the five of them stood facing each other. Peter extended his hand first to shake Errol's hand. As he did, he said, Hi, I'm Peter Corbin and this is my wife, Sarah. It's nice to finally meet you, Errol. Phyllis has talked about you at the office before. They shook hands and Errol replied with a slight smile, Nice to meet you too, Peter. He shifts his eyes toward Sarah and said, And you too, Sarah. Hello, Errol, and it's nice to see you again too, Phyllis, Sarah replied. Hello again to you as well, Sarah. I see you are trying to keep Peter in line too, Phyllis said with a smile. Yeah, it's a challenge sometimes, but I manage, Sarah replied with a smile. Well, let's meet the others before this gets too much rougher, Carl suggested while leading them to the next couple. They walked toward another couple of which Peter and Sarah recognized the man from the bank. I believe you two have met George Stewart from the bank, and this is his wife Petra, Carl said as they approached the couple. Peter first shook hands with George and said, Nice to see you again, George, and thanks again for the good deal on the loan. Oh, no problem, Peter. I know I have to establish a good relationship with you so you can send some more business my way, George replied as he shook Peter's hand. It's nice to meet you, Petra, Peter said extending his hand to Petra. Peter, it is nice to meet you, Petra replied in a German accent. Petra then extended her hand toward Sarah and shook her hand, and asked, Hello Sarah, how are you? I'm doing well. Thank you, Petra, Sarah replied. How do you like this town so far? Petra asked both of them. Well, I have been really enjoying it, and I think Sarah is learning to like it as well, Peter replied. Yes, I am starting to like this town, Sarah replied. Carl, get these folks a drink, George suggested with a smile. Oh, I plan to, just one more person then I'll get them set up with drinks, Carl replied. Carl steers them toward Colleen, who was at the food table sampling a few of the snacks. The three of them walked toward Colleen, and she turned to greet them. Sarah could tell she was looking and smiling mostly at Peter. Hello Peter, so glad you could make it, Colleen said with a smile as Peter, Sarah, and Carl stopped in front of them. Hi Colleen, it's nice to see you again, Peter said smiling back to Colleen. Colleen, this is my wife, Sarah, he continued, gesturing toward Sarah. Hello Sarah, Colleen said to Sarah. Hi, Sarah replied with a slight smile. Colleen looked back toward Peter, and asked, Oh, I forgot to ask you if you like the style of the house we appraised today. Yes I did, it is actually similar to our house, style-wise at least, Peter replied. Really? I'll have to see your house sometime, Colleen commented. Honey, I'm a bit thirsty. Could you get me a drink? Sarah asked as she tried to change the subject. Oh sure, Sarah. Where do you have the bar set up, Carl? Peter asked, looking toward Carl. I have that set up on the kitchen counter. Just follow me, Carl said as he led them toward the kitchen. After reaching the kitchen counter with several liquor bottles and other mixers, Carl asked, "What would you like to drink, Sarah?" "How about a gin and tonic?" she replied, feeling a little more relaxed.